If you ask me, the lifeblood of a Bethesda game is the mods. Don't get me wrong, obviously you need a solid base game that people will be interested in, that they'll be engaged in, and that will make them wonder about future possibilities. But what actually I think keeps Bethesda games selling for the long term is the mods and the possibility of new content, additions, enhancements that just keeps the game fresh. I mean, if it wasn't for mods, Skyrim would not have sold anywhere near as many copies, if you ask me, and it would not have been worth to release so many editions of that game throughout generations. But the fact that mod support was there, the modders came in strong, and that consoles also got mods, I think really helped boost that game, which is why it's still seeing really solid numbers if you look at, Steam concurrent players. Now, if modders decide that a Bethesda game is too boring and, they start pulling out, that's not a particularly good sign, which is kind of the topic of today's video. So there is this modding team that created this mod called Skyrim Together. And what this added was essentially online co-op for Skyrim. You can delve into this world with multiple players. It works fairly well. It took a while for this mod to get made, and there were some controversies involving them using Skyrim script extender code without permission and stuff like that. So there were some setbacks here and there, but they did correct where they needed to course correct. And eventually they did continue development and announce a release date of July 8th, 2022. The mod eventually did come out, and it was fairly functional, and from what I understand, it's still, they're still working on it and updating it where they can. And it is a mod that was pretty revolutionary. It literally added a multiplayer mode, a co-op mode for Skyrim, which is kind of incredible. And they were hoping that they could do something similar for Starfield. But unfortunately for Starfield, it's no longer 2011. The things I could get away with for Skyrim in terms of just dated game design, dated technical elements that translated into Starfield, combined with the fact that Starfield is missing what Skyrim has, which is one cohesive, handcrafted open world that you can lose yourself in because there's just so much empty space, so much dead volume in the form of space and procedurally generated content that's not all that interesting. Starfield has lost a lot of its luster, combined with the fact that it inherits a lot of Bethesda's bad habits. And the end result is that some modders are deciding that it's not worth making their mods for Starfield. Now, speaking of habits, this brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Fume, a company dedicated to easing the transition for individuals who want to reduce or stop bad habits. This is an innovative, award-winning device that imitates the motions and actions of bad habits while taking out all of the bad elements involving inhalation of unhealthy chemicals, instead offering a delicious, naturally flavored scent to replace the harmful substances. There are no vapors or electronics involved here. Just breathe in and taste something refreshing while performing actions that will scratch the itch and fill the void of the habit itself, akin to a placebo. There are plenty of flavors to choose from. I recently tried one of the top-selling flavors, Crisp Mint, which both tasted and felt really fresh, filling my mouth and nose with a nice cooling sensation. Inserting the flavored corn to the device was super quick and simple, and once I took a hit, the aroma permeated in a really pleasant way. There was no coughing, no irritation, just air that smelled and tasted really good. The device itself feels very premium with its combination of high-quality wood and metal, with magnets holding them together, and the metal part itself rotates to adjust the amount of airflow, and it's also a great way for fidgeters to keep their fingers busy. Fume has also introduced their Solano version of the device, featuring a walnut barrel and an onyx black-coated mouthpiece with a smoother finish. Switching to Fume is easy and enjoyable, which is why over 150,000 customers have made the change with thousands of success stories, and you could be one of them. If breaking destructive habits is up your alley, you can pick up the Journey Pack today by heading to tryfume.com/yongyeah or scanning the QR code and using the code YONGYEAH to get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use the code YONGYEAH to save an additional 10% on your order today. So what's going on with this particular group of modders? Well, they've decided that Starfield is just not an interesting enough game for them to pour manpower and resources into this mod to translate this mod for Starfield. Keep in mind that they're not making money making this stuff. This is a passion project, and if they're not passionate about the game that they're modding for, then they're not going to be passionate about the mod itself, which is why we're seeing headlines like this one from IGN. Skyrim Together modders aren't making a multiplayer mode for Starfield, but the code is now open source in case anyone wants to take over. So on Discord, they released the following statement about Starfield, and they had some rather harsh words to share about their Starfield experience and why they ultimately decided it's not worth making this mod for Starfield. So it reads right here, let's talk about Starfield. When the game released, I was hyped, like a lot of people, but probably for different reasons. I spent launch day and a few days after reverse engineering the game and porting over gameplay hooks from Skyrim Together to a potential Starfield Together mod. I ported about 70% of Skyrim Together reversed code to Starfield Together. There was just one problem, and this is a direct quote. This game is fucking trash. Like that is not I can see the appeal of this game, but it's not for me. It's straight up just a complete admonishment and rejection of this game, a stark contrast to their passion for something like Skyrim. The modder continues, I didn't realize this until after I actually started playing the damn game a week after launch. The game is boring, bland, and the main draw of Bethesda games, exploration in a lively and handcrafted world, was completely gone. And that was my issue with the game as well, my primary issue with this title. It's the one thing that makes Bethesda games, and Starfield, ironically, and leaning into its space motif, it loses that sense of go anywhere and find something interesting to do because everything is so segmented now. They focus so much on volume over density that they had to split that volume into a bunch of little pieces with tons of loading screens in between. And the end result was that the sense of exploration of just like kind of go somewhere and always find something interesting was completely gone because you're fast traveling everywhere. And then if you go to a procedurally generated planet, most of it is empty. When you do find content, it's repetitive procedural stuff that has no real dramatic impact on your gameplay experience or on your progression. And the handcrafted stuff just feels so split apart now that despite this game technically being bigger, everything just feels kind of smaller. What they did was they took an open world map like Skyrim's and then they chopped it up into 100 pieces and just kind of put little piecemeal things on different planets. And in between those planets is just a whole lot of nothing. There's just this hub called space that is not interesting to explore or traverse through. So you're often just kind of skipping through a lot of empty space, engaging in loading screens, fast traveling, and that becomes the exploration loop. And it really lost to me what made Bethesda games. And it would seem as though this is something that this modder was afflicted by. Anyways, everyone already knows this. Most people agree. There's no need to further repeat the point. Just read any of the dozens of reviews online. And those reviews, while there were initially a lot of glowing reviews, I think as more time went by and as more people play the game, those reviews slowly began to really highlight the flaws of this game. Even on Steam, over time, we saw this score go from positive, and now it's at a mixed score of 66% total from a whopping 84.8 thousand reviews, almost 85,000 reviews now. That's a good sample size in stark contrast to something like Skyrim, which overall is sitting at a very positive review score of 94% from almost 150,000 user reviews. The modder concludes with, that said, I won't be continuing development on Starfield Together. I'm not going to put my heart and soul into a mod for a game as mediocre as this. Still, I did work on it, so I'll just throw my reverse engineer code online in the open source Tilted Evolution repo in case anyone wants to finish it. Let me be clear, though. What I did so far is port reverse engineered code and hooks over. There is no playable version of Starfield Together right now. I'll upload the code later today. So he's giving people an opportunity to finish this, and you know, a bulk of the work, 70% of the work is done, but this is not something that this mod or the originator of, you know, Skyrim Together wants to continue engaging with because he finds it to be a waste of time and just kind of a passionless project. That's the thing about any game's modding scene. For it to thrive, the base game has to attract enough attention that modders will feel passionate about making mods for this game. They'll feel passionate about an audience that's equally enthusiastic about the game and its possibilities of expansion. But Starfield, because of its mixed reception and because of the fact that it's relying so much on modders to fix its myriad issues, I think we're getting to a point where some modders are just, they're getting tired of having to fix Bethesda stuff. And just in terms of the general gaming audience, you can see that interest surrounding Starfield has diminished quite quickly, with the 24-hour peak concurrent players for Starfield right now sitting at 15,000 players from an all-time peak of 330,000 players, which is actually lower than Skyrim's current 24-hour peak of almost 19,000 players, 18,799 players. We're talking about a game that came out in 2011. The special edition came out later, but you get the idea. It's an old game, and more people are engaging with Skyrim than they are with the brand new, the shiny new Starfield from Bethesda. Now, Starfield hasn't officially launched its modding tools yet, so who knows? Maybe once the modding tools launch and people really get to make some amazing mods for this game, maybe things can turn around for Starfield. But mods are possible to be made for Starfield right now. And when we're looking at some really prominent modders looking at the game and going, the game's kind of boring, it's trash, I don't want to make mods for it, it's just a bad early sign. Again, I do believe that for Bethesda games, modders and mods and modding is the long-term lifeblood of these games. And if Starfield falters on that front, and if modders are losing interest in Starfield, then long-term wise, Starfield might be in a bit of trouble. It should be noted that Fallout 4 tends to get around similar 24-hour peak concurrent players as Starfield does, even a little higher than Starfield does. And Fallout 4 tends to be one of the Bethesda games with the least amount of fanfare, but in comes Starfield to kind of become the new black sheep of the Bethesda series of single-player games. Fallout 4 is thriving more than Starfield is, and that's because despite all of the flaws that Fallout 4 has, it still has that sense of like a handcrafted open world where it feels like you can kind of go anywhere and always find something new or something interesting. Even with the lesser reception that Fallout 4 got, the Skyrim Together modding team are developing Fallout Together for Fallout 4. So the fact that with Starfield they drew a line and said, this game is just not good enough for our efforts, like that kind of tells you, even compared to Fallout 4, just how short Starfield fell for a lot of people. Now, this is just one group of modders. Maybe there are plenty of modders out there who have some grand ideas about ways they could mod this game and improve it or add some substantial new content, especially because there's so much blank canvas to work with in Starfield, for better, I guess, for modders, and for worse for players. People just wanted something tighter and more focused, but Bethesda went too grand scale with it, and it ended up stretching the whole experience thin. They took a puddle's worth of content and they didn't just stretch it out across an ocean, they stretched it out across a galaxy, you know what I mean? I'm not saying this is the nail in the coffin for Starfield. I think we'll really see how active the modding scene becomes when the modding tools officially release, and then we'll see just what kind of spike in players Starfield gets, if it gets any. And Bethesda is seemingly working on some updates to add some quality of life features. This is a statement from Bethesda that reads, "We're also hard at work on many of the new features you asked for, from city maps to mod support to all new ways of traveling, but only time will tell whether Bethesda's level of commitment is akin to, say, the commitment that CD Projekt Red showed when they not only fixed Cyberpunk 2077, but expanded its features and content significantly to ensure that the final experience could be more akin to what was initially promised and to how the game should have originally launched. It sucks that we're going to have to wait for, new ways of traveling," which I'm assuming they're referring to vehicles to be able to be used on planets. So walking around all that dead, empty space is nowhere near as tedious, and exploring those empty planets is more bearable and less insufferable. But I would say that those quality of life, new features and enhancements won't be enough to fix the core fundamental problem with the game, which is that the way exploration is handled is just so much worse than past Bethesda games because of space and all this emptiness. And if Starfield's flaws are bad enough that even modders start losing passion for this game, that's when Starfield's long-term viability is going to suffer tremendously. So we'll see, but it is a significantly steeper uphill battle for Starfield compared to Skyrim. In the meantime, though, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the Skyrim Together modding team deciding this game is just too boring, and I mean, what they say exactly, that it was trash or whatever. Do you think that serves as a foreboding indication of how the modding scene might play out in the future? Or do you think that this one group of modders deciding to call it quits on Starfield doesn't necessarily mean that the modding scene won't thrive for Starfield once modding tools are released, and that we'll see this game actually continue a healthy long-term lifespan? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.